kind of randomly, kind of out there. It wasn't really a real dream. And in that, if someone had brought it into my life, well, then great, I would have jumped on it and done it and been like, yay. But actually, in that recognition that it doesn't necessarily happen, or doesn't really happen unless you do it yourself, it hadn't come into my life, and so it hadn't happened. And so this was me kind of turning around saying, actually, rather than just dreaming of it, I think I'm gonna try living on a boat.
On Stories of Self, we go on journeys into the lives of ourselves and others. We see how stories connect, how they diverge, and how we can create our worlds and solve our problems. This is the real-life remix of storytelling, which is so often stranger than fiction. So come and sit around the fire, chill by the ocean, or get a coffee with me, as I delve into the stories of self that make, break, and remake us. Some stories are dramatic, some are serene, some will magically mirror you, and some will be delightfully different. I'm your host, Katie Reeve Arnold, and this is Stories of Self.
Hey, welcome back to Stories of Self. And it's been a while, right? It's been a little while. So what have I been doing? Have I given up? Have you given up in that journey, or have we just been doing different things? So for me, I've been going out and living a couple of dreams, and those couple of dreams weren't necessarily compatible with recording a podcast. It's not to say that they couldn't be in the future, but that actually in the temporary state they existed while I tried them out, they just weren't. Okay, so that's kind of the compromise we take. But I think it's also really important to notice that, you go out and you make these things happen. I mean, I saw a quote the other day and I love it, and I kind of live by something similar actually, which is, if you're waiting for somebody to come in and make your life better and give you everything you want and everything you need and everything you've dreamed of, you just have to be really aware that that person is always really going to be you. So in any circumstance, in any situation, it's always going to be you that actually creates and chooses what it is that is in your life. And if that's what you want, great. And if it's not what you want, then you're the architect, you're the controller, you're that person that can change it. So what was my dream? So one of my dreams that I lived was actually being on the water, so living on a boat. I'd always wondered if I would like this. I was a marine biologist, well, I still am in some ways, but I was an active on the water daily marine biologist for 10 years. And so I was on and off boats, every day of the week pretty much, and I absolutely loved it. But it was short-term boats, these weren't liverboards. These were ribs, those kind of like, they've got a couple of engines at the back, and they've got kind of like the rubber pontoons that you sit on. And so that I was on those every day, going out onto the ocean and looking for wildlife and things. And I absolutely loved it. And I just loved being on the water. A friend of mine says, it's a good day when you're on a boat. And so I wondered if I could apply that and actually go and find a boat to live on. And, how would that change my life? So I've been going between different places for quite a while. And what that does is it creates a minimalism by design. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm one of those magazine kind of shoot minimalists where everything's like stark and grey. It means more like I have to choose what's really important to me. And I think that can be really valuable actually, because back to that kind of Fight Club mentality of, do we own our possessions or do they wind up owning us? Yeah, so actually maintaining all those things that we think we own can take over our lives. So another desirable thing about a boat is that it's a smaller space. So it's a smaller space. No, smaller space. It's a smaller space to furnish, and it's a smaller space to have things within. So it makes you more selective about what you want to have there. So I started thinking about it, and I started, well, realistically, I said to a friend of mine, I was on holiday, and I said to a friend of mine, I think I'm going to try living on a boat. We were talking about it. He's looking at buying a boat and living on a boat. And I was like, I think I'm going to try living on a boat, because we'd been talking about it between us for a few years, but right, kind of esoterically, kind of randomly, kind of out there. It wasn't really a real dream. And in that, if someone had brought it into my life, well, then great, I would have jumped on it and done it and been like, yay. But actually, in that recognition that it doesn't necessarily happen, or doesn't really happen unless you do it yourself, it hadn't come into my life, and so it hadn't happened. And so this was me kind of turning around saying, actually, rather than just dreaming of it, I think I'm going to try living on a boat. And so what I did was I just had a quick look to see about boat sitting, because I do house sitting and pet sitting, and it's an incredible way to actually enter a world that you think you might be interested in, but you're not quite sure you want to commit to renting or buying into or becoming static in right now. And it gives you this great opportunity to try on all these different places and all these different ways of life. And in relation to the pets, actually, all the different breeds of, for example, dog and cat. It's actually really interesting to me that I wouldn't have realized it so much before I did a lot of pet sitting, but the personality of particularly dogs, but also cats in a way, can be really aligned with the breed. And so it's really not about aesthetics, Obviously, I already know that. I'm into animal welfare. So I already know that you don't pick a pet based upon how it looks. But I think that sometimes people don't really realize just how strongly the personality of the pet can be aligned with the breed. And that really then starts to dictate the lifestyle you're going to have together. And in a nice way, if that lifestyle is aligned with the lifestyle you are living or want to live, then that's great. But if it's not, then it's going to be inevitable conflict between what you need or want and what the pet needs or wants. And so this has been really awesome to find these things out. In fact, I might talk about more of that in a different episode, because it's been a really cool journey for me. But yeah, in relation to trying out different ways of life, I've found it's beautiful. You can step into an area, you can step into a world, and you can try it on for size. And it's quite funny, actually, somehow, sometimes, how you find that something that seems idyllic or looks ideal from the outside isn't so in keeping or aligned with you when you're standing within it. So, for example, when I was a little girl, I always thought, and there's a kind of challenge between thought and taught, because at that age, the two cross over when you're very small, when you're kind of 3, 4, 5 years old. It's very difficult to know what it is you're thinking, what it is you're being kind of taught and absorbing from the world around you is the right thing to do, because we're so focused on our sense of belonging at that stage. But I thought I wanted to have a set kind of home down a country track in the countryside, away from everyone else. And at the end of that, I thought I wanted it to be like a small holding. I thought I wanted it to have lots and lots of different animals and pets and this kind of thing. Not really as a livestock kind of endeavor or a farm, but more as a kind of really big allotment, if you like, a really big place where I could grow vegetables and just tinker around with, growing my own food and things. And I could also have chickens and ducks and, wildlife and also pets and things in large numbers. And a big house, that's what I thought, a big house down in the countryside. And Just this summer, I actually spent some time in exactly that. I spent some time in a really lovely big old house that had been recently done up in several sections and renovated and had a massive extension, this kind of thing, to modernize it, with a massive garden. And it was, a little bit out of the way, and they had lots and lots of pets. They had dogs and chickens and rabbits and, fish and all sorts of things, going on there. And what I quickly realized, although I enjoyed the experience of being in that environment, what I quickly realized was how much of my time was actually going towards maintaining and managing that situation. So that idyllic way in my head that I'd created as a child, or that I'd absorbed from the world when I turned around and said I like animals and tried to work out what was possible, and they'd said, well, lots of pets then, It's funny how people do that, right? If you turn around as a child and say you like animals, people immediately turn around and say, well, you must have a lot of pets, you must want a lot of pets, rather than saying, or going along the lines of thinking you enjoy them as wildlife. And so in this house, this big house in the countryside with all these pets that I was dutifully looking after as well as I could and managing, but that was really taking a lot of my day every day to do that kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, I benefited from it. It also had a swimming pool, which again was lovely. I mean, amazing, wonderful. I love to swim, okay? But, geez, that pool does not take care of itself. And of course, I already know that, and I already know how to look after a swimming pool, which is why someone left me in charge of one. But the thing is that it really starts to, when you're doing it on a regular basis, it's different when it's an esoteric idea in your mind. It's different when it's a random idea in your mind. When it actually takes hold in your day and you see how much of your life you're spending doing it and how much life you've got left over for other things you want to do, you really start balancing it out, That question of would I do that, or would I prefer to go to a pool? Would I prefer to have pets? Or was I just enjoying the birds in the garden and the rabbits? And actually there was a hare as well, and there was a few other, and deer and things. And so was I enjoying the wildlife that would come through the garden and into the garden and then leave on its own path? Was I enjoying that just as much or more than I was enjoying some of the pets, And so these kind of things actually, house sitting has really brought those into my life. It's really allowed me to recognize the duties, responsibilities, the realities. There's a thing called radical acceptance. Radical acceptance. No, I said this to a friend of mine. She might recognize herself when she listens, actually. And she thought I said radical expectance. No. Not radical expectance. You can't radically expect things from the world. You can radically accept what the world is. And then you can bring yourself what you want to it. And so radical acceptance of what it actually was to live that life. And so this was similar going into the boat life. I had this idea in my mind of living on a boat, but what would it really be like? And so having spoken to my friend about it and just brought it into reality there in a random statement sitting on a beach in the south of France at the end of July. Was it end of July? Middle to end of July. But I then had this kind of experience in the countryside racked up for the beginning of August through towards the to the end of August. And then immediately after that, I just had a quick look online for anyone who's looking for someone to look after their boat. And very quickly, I ended up spending the entirety of September and most of October as well, looking after boats. So these were canal barges, narrow boats, and I was looking after them on the canals and rivers around London. Sorry, can you hear the rain? I mean, probably you can. It's raining here. Hopefully that won't come out too bad in the audio. I guess I'll have a check afterwards, but maybe it'll be slightly atmospheric as long as the storm doesn't take off too much. so I looked after these boats, and each boat had a cat on, which was beautiful and lovely, because it always feels like when you enter a house or you enter a boat in this case, if you enter someone else's space and it's just you in their space, I don't know, I just don't think it would feel as connecting as when I enter someone else's space and there's a pet there waiting for me. Then it kind of becomes the pet's space, you know. It was kind of ended up feeling a bit like it was the cat's boat. And I was just there sharing it with the cat for a while, and we were just enjoying our time together. Obviously, I connect with the owners as well, and obviously I feed back to the owners and deal with the owners too. But I love having the pets there as well. It feels like a connection to, I guess, the person living on the boat in a nice way, without actually being in each other's actual space while they're there and while I'm there. And it's a perfect win-win-win, actually, because it's great for the pet, because the pet doesn't have to go to a kennel or a cattery or this kind of thing, or be left alone. And then it's perfect for the owner, because the owner has to or wants to go away. And it's perfect for me, because I only do the pet sits and house sits and boat sits that I actually want to do. So it's perfect all round, really, and everyone seems to do really well out of it. And so I started looking after these boats, but one of the things I realised quite quickly is that it's not so ideal for recording a podcast on a boat. I think that's because of several different reasons. One is because of the electrics. So one of the boats I was on, the electrics there was not so much electricity. There wasn't so many solar panels. Then another boat I was on, there was more solar panels, so the electrics worked more like normal, but it was in a busier location. So there was always people kind of going by, and it was quite loud. Of course, the boats can move, so that's one of the benefits, actually, of living on a boat, is that if you don't like the area you're in, you move, yeah? But it did leave me feeling a bit kind of that I couldn't record the podcast there. And so it drifted a bit. Although there is a specific podcast recording boat, well, at least one, based in Little Venice in London. So I did walk past that one. I think they must just have some really incredible soundproofing because, it's not quiet on the water. You can hear people as they go outside, as they walk by. And you do get the occasional tap, actually, a knock on the door or knock on the roof from somebody who's up or down and wants to chat or wants to, interact. One of the great things about boat life, actually, is the boat community. So people are really there for each other. But it didn't necessarily lend itself at that moment so much to recording a podcast. But I think also that's possibly because I was just in the experience. So I'd created that experience for myself, and I was really into living it, having that experience. So I just did other things during that time. And it was it was fantastic. All I can say is, this is not all I can say, because I'm actually going to do another episode on what living on the boat was like. But I really wanted to focus right now today on how we create our own dreams and how we create rather than wait. Because I think it's very easy to have a daydream, have an idea, have a vision, have a wish, and hope for someone else to fulfill it. Sure, after all, aren't we fed all these fairy stories of wishing upon a star or rubbing a lamp and something coming and just creating that for you? But essentially, when you wish upon that star's within you. We are stardust, right? We are made of stardust. Actually, I bought a necklace the other day with some money from that a beautiful person I know gave me for my birthday, and it's meteorite. So, but aren't we all? We might not all have smacked into the earth like that meteorite did, but we all are made of this gathered stardust from previous stars, previous galaxies. Yeah. So when you wish upon a star, you kind of wish upon yourself, like you wish for yourself to do something. And, even the genie in the lamp, essentially it's you, right? You are your own genie that you will to actually do your command. Isn't that true? Anyway, I'll leave you to think about that, and I'll do another episode on what it is to step into boat life.
We are all telling our stories, and we are all telling ourselves stories about it all. Are you brave enough to walk with me into hearing, considering, and understanding the stories we tell? Join me next time, where we'll be considering more stories and illusions and stepping into creating the freedom we desire. Every moment, we are who we are choosing to be. You choose. Choose you, because your story matters.